For better or worse, cash is the oxygen of your business, and you can't last long in any environment without it. Neil Blumenthal. Welcome to the Stitch for Success podcast. I'm your host, Monica Allen. I'm a wife, mom, daughter, entrepreneur, friend, and lifelong learner. I have a love and passion for all things small business. If you are a budding entrepreneur thinking about starting your own business, or if you have been running your business for a few years, I want to help you. Every week, my goal is to bring you tips, thoughts, inspirations, and education to help you on your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for joining me today. I recently had the pleasure of conducting an interview that had so many golden nuggets. My guest and I really talked for a long time. While I don't want to cut this interview short, I do like to keep my podcast somewhat brief, so I'm breaking up this podcast into 2 shows. I hope you will tune in for both episodes. Today, I'm speaking with a woman that is a force to be reckoned with, and she is someone I have admired for a number of years for her strength and tenacity. Not only is she a wife and a mother of 3 daughters and 1 angel due to an inoperable brain tumor, she also owns and operates 2 locations of her very successful insurance agency and is the co-founder and chairperson of Keris Kares Inc, a nonprofit that exists to support families impacted by pediatric cancer. She has received numerous awards for her work with her clients and was recently featured in a national commercial for State Farm Insurance. She focuses on providing education, strategies, and asset protection to her clients. Having experienced the highs and lows of life, Deidre Bembry, my guest today, is passionate about helping people gain control of their lives. Deidre is an advocate for entrepreneurs and believes that every experience in life is a teachable moment put before us only to make us better. I'm so humbled to have Deidre, owner of Deidre Bembry Insurance Agency, join me on the Stitch for Success podcast today. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Deidre, we're going to jump right in. I know that you've been in business and the financial services industry for almost 20 years. What was your reason for taking that leap and starting your own agency over 10 years ago?
I always felt that there was more for me to do. I am what I like to call a fallen doctor. My undergraduate degree is in biology. In my mind, I knew I was going to be an OBGYN, and my experience at the University of Georgia was telling me otherwise, that that wasn't the plan. So I continued to stick with completing my program because I had one of those moms that had me on the 4-year plan no matter what. So I ended up graduating with this biology degree that I knew without a doubt that I wouldn't be using. And so I moved home again, another thing that just wasn't on my plan. So after school, I moved back to my hometown of Warner Robins and began working right away at a company called Geico, which was located, their headquarters was in Macon, Georgia. So as I began working there, I really competitive nature that if I was going to be doing this, then I wanted to work for the number 1 company. And so at the time, I had a longtime family friend. Geico was ranked number 4 or 5 at the time in the insurance industry. And we had a family friend that was an executive at State Farm. So he set it up to where I could get an interview. We kind of laid it out. I said, I really don't want to do this. I'm going to do this for about 2 years and then really figure out what I want to do. But I know I can't be at home as a college graduate. And so I moved to Atlanta after getting the job, and I started working for State Farm in their claims department. And then from there, continued to advance throughout the company over the next 10 years. I was moving my career forward, and I realized at that time that, this is a great company to work for. And I really like, insurance as an industry, and I'm really falling in love. I know that sounds crazy with risk management. And I began to learn more about the agency program. And just as you hear most entrepreneurs, you just have that itch, no matter what you're doing. If you're a true entrepreneur at heart, you are just never content with being an employee. It's something that really is it's impossible to do for the long term. And so I remember saying to my mentor at that time, after my performance review, and I had gotten the highest marks on it, but there was still a cap to my income. And I remember literally being in tears, and he was so confused. He said, "Why are you crying? I mean, you've gotten the highest marks, you're getting what's available for you to get for your increase. Why are you upset about that?" I said, "Because there's a cap. And when I'm working, I'm giving my all. And then the company decides what's available for me to receive." And I said, "And I'm not going to do this anymore." And so, as soon as we can get me in the agency program so that I can get on the path to entrepreneurship, I don't want to leave State Farm, but I've got to be in the lane of State Farm that allows me to be independent, that allows me to maximize my potential, and allows me to have full control of my earning capability. And so that's how, I ended up as a State Farm agent. So it was really a journey.
Wow, Deidre, that is fantastic. What were you, late 20s, maybe early 30s with that thought process?
I was definitely in my mid 20s when I started having that unrest about corporate America. And then I got into the agency program when I was 26 years old. And I got selected when I was 28. And then I started that process at age 29 to go through my training process.
So you're at 29 years old. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome when you started your business?
That's such a great question. I really think back to starting, and it was not what I envisioned it to be. I think that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, that what we plan for and that business plan and what we envision in our head rarely takes place when we open our business. For me, the biggest challenge, and this is going to sound really kind of crazy to say, but the realest thing that happened to me was being face to face with
Wow.
failure. I had never in my professional life failed at anything. In my mind, I was a golden girl. If I set my eyes on it, I got it. If I wanted it, I did it, and there was not a whole lot of anything in between me and my goal. But I will tell you, business ownership was daunting. Being an entrepreneur was daunting. There was so much that I found out quickly, that despite my planning, despite my vision, there was just a world of things that I didn't know. And coming to grips with the fact that, wait a minute, I am not as prepared for this as I thought I was really hard, just from an ego standpoint. And then really struggling initially was really hard from a mental standpoint, because I realized for the first time in my life that I was in over my head, and it happened really fast.
And it's my understanding that you started your business during the recession.
Yes, and that was not my intention. I do want to definitely say that. At the time, we were in the middle of the housing boom. People were selling real estate left and right. And one of the core lines in insurance is auto and fire. And people were buying homes left and right. And in the era of 2007 and 2008, home ownership was a big thing, and everybody was eating. The mortgage lenders were eating, the realtors were eating, the insurance agents were eating. Subdivisions were going up left and right. And what I didn't know at the time is the bubble was about to pop, and it did. And so when I accepted my opportunity, it was a new market opportunity. And that was just a fancy way for saying scratch. You're getting nothing. You're going into an area that is so full of opportunity and booming that you're not going to need an assignment or a client to start with. They will come. And so I opened my doors in Noonan, Georgia, which is considered a bedroom county of South Atlanta, a huge community for Delta and a lot of people commuting into the city from the South Side. And it just seemed like it was a great idea. And literally, I remember 2 months before I opened, the financial meltdown began to really take shape. My banking institutions disappeared. I remember at the time I had a lot of my credit lines with Wachovia
Right.
who they didn't make it. Like they literally got bought out by Wells Fargo at the time. And so everything shifted. Everything that I had in place financially literally disappeared right before my eyes.
What what type of support did
Yes.
you have from from State Farm? Maybe thinking maybe they'd gone through that in the past, or was there any type of support there from the company side to kind of get you through?
No, it wasn't. I mean, you get your initial training, you get a $25,000 line of credit, which you apply for, and they typically grant, which they did. And then you get $18,000 as a signing bonus to begin, which, as you know, if you're opening up a space and you have to do a build out, that can go very quickly. And so my liquid assets were really limited. My credit assets were extensive because I had leveraged being credit worthy. So I had lines of credit, at several other institutions, but uh, they changed the rules during the recession because lending
Right.
became really tight at that time. And so even though, you may remember if you were approved for something, you began to have to start jumping through hoops to use the money that you were approved for, or they changed the terms of the money that you had because they couldn't afford to lend that money. So it was a huge lesson in having access to cash.
So, Deidre, what lesson did you learn from that?
And for me, the lesson there is no substitute for cash ever. I don't care what type of business you're in. That phrase, cash is king, came along for a reason. It is always king. As an entrepreneur, no matter what point you're on during your journey, you are going to need access to cash to move your business forward. That was a tremendous lesson. I also learned that being conservative was not something I was accustomed to being. I was a risk taker. If it was a risk, I would say, what's the worst? I can bet on myself. And I know if I bet on myself, I can get things done and I can get the win if I'm relying on myself. But really, as an entrepreneur, when you're having to be everything, the janitor, the HR manager, the sales lead, the employee, your accountant, you have to learn to have conservative practices to make it through the highs and lows of entrepreneurship.
So, that was a great lesson that you talked about being conservative and knowing what you know now. I know that's one element, being conservative, but what is something else you would tell your younger self starting out on your entrepreneurial journey?
If we had that magic button to go back and I could whisper in my ear, I really think that I would tell myself to live small. And that's something I just did not understand. To me, success was about if I work for it, I deserve it. If I want it, I'm going to get it. If I want something else, I'll get another job. And by any means, I'm going to get what I want because I'm going to put in the work to get what I want. I think as just someone in my 20s and someone that just came from a middle class household, I had that desire in me to never be denied anything that I wanted. And as a 20-year-old with not a lot of experience, I got overextended really, really fast, you know. And I think it's one thing to be credit worthy and to be able to get access to the things you want. It's another thing to use that access to get everything you want. And that was a big learning for me as an entrepreneur because you really have to be small on the outside of your life. And this doesn't apply to everybody, but I will say my experience was one mistake I made was having a big mortgage. I had a big car payment. I had still some credit card debt that I had not addressed from a big shopping habit. And so I was under the wrong impression that I was paying my bills and never had a late payment. But what I should have been doing was denying myself a little bit more. And that's a concept I was not familiar with. I never once, prior to being an entrepreneur, looked at the concept of waiting or denying myself or delaying anything. Everything for me was about instant gratification and being able to go through the list of, I want to be a home ownership. So as soon as we opened up the business prior to opening, we sold one home, we had equity, and then we turned around and we put all of our equity into getting the new home. You know, that was a tremendous mistake because I transferred wealth unknowingly at that time, you know. And then wouldn't it have been wonderful to have access to that same cash? I had a car. I just had our family had enlarged. So the car that I had that was paid for, you know, I got rid of that paid for car and I got the car that I wanted that came with a car note. And so that was, you know, another learning. I would have loved to have had somebody whisper in my ear and say, you know, baby, it's okay to wait. It's okay to drive that car around a little bit longer or, you know, instead of locking into a mortgage, why not find you somewhere to rent for a year until you can kind of see what your new cash flow looks like? And those are just things that I missed. And those were missteps and learnings that took a long time to recover from.
That is probably a lesson that we have all learned the hard way. And if anyone can take anything from this, that is a lesson to learn. Same thing here. You know, you feel like you've worked for it. You've been working so hard. Well, I deserve this. I've worked for this. I've been working 12-hour days, you know, but yeah, denying yourself. I think it's Dave Ramsey who says something like, live today so you can live tomorrow unlike anyone else. And I totally jacked that up, but it's something like that. And, you know, yeah,
I know where you're coming from. I agree
yeah, for sure.
100%.
So as an entrepreneur, what keeps you going each day? Because I know you've had, you know, ups and downs, but what keeps you going every day?
The vision. I think as entrepreneurs, you always have to know your why behind your what. So for me, as you said, I wasn't a risk management major, I was a biology major. So it's not that I'm so committed to insurance. I didn't even major in risk management. I'm committed to what being a student of insurance has created on the other side of that equation. So, insurance is the what, which allows me to be an entrepreneur and touch people and reach people and impact their lives by taking care of them and protecting them. But it's not my why. My why is still separate. My why is my family. My why is my freedom. My why is freedom not only in the form of time, but freedom financially. And so I think as things go up and down and twist and turn, as they are guaranteed to do when you're a business owner, you always have to be able to look somewhere and say, okay, why am I doing this? Why did I want to do this in the first place? Why am I working all these hours? Oh, I know why. It's this. And your why has always got to be crystal clear, because the trials and the tribulations and the ups and downs are guaranteed. But so are the wins. The highs are really high, but sometimes the lows are really low. And so when you're in those spaces, I think it's really important to never lose focus of your why. That's what's going to keep you moving forward.
Yeah, that's very true. Now, you mentioned time and hours working. How many hours would you say you worked when you first started your business versus now? Is there any difference?
It is. When I first started my business, when the doors opened, sometimes I think, when we look back and we see our circumstances at the time we opened, and I find myself saying now, how did I do that? How in the world did I do that? I think entrepreneurs get some type of adrenaline that just kind of pushes them through this those initial phases of being an entrepreneur. Because if I had to go back now and do what I did then, I just don't know. I don't know what that would look like. But when I opened my doors, I was newly married. I was about 3 years into my marriage. We had a 2 month old and we had a 20-month old. And I was a nursing mom. I was dealing with the changing of roles. My husband, who was used to going out and working, found himself at home due to the recession. So he was actually switching gears and helping take care of the kids. And so I remember, him supporting me in that way. He was cooking, he was with the children and doing everything that they needed. Meanwhile, I might run home at 6 o'clock, see my family briefly, nurse my daughter, and run back to the office. And I might be there to 10 o'clock at night and then hit repeat the next day. So, I mean, I was working an insane amount of hours, and it took its toll. I mean, it took its toll on my marriage, it took its toll on me as a mom, having
Yeah.
mom guilt. But I'm so thankful that that was a phase, because now, 11 years in, I can have a conversation around boundaries and quality, because now I have afforded myself to be in that space to say, well, now I can make different choices. Whereas when I first began that journey, I didn't have any choices. Everything had to be done and everything had to
Right.
be done by me. And I think that's the one thing that evolved as I became a more seasoned entrepreneur.
When did you hire your first employee and what was that experience like?
So I started with 2 employees. I've always had employees from day one. Um, there's really a secret sauce to hiring human resources. I will say that. That's a whole nother conversation in itself, but really going through a very intentional process of seeking people to join your team that have a shared vision. So I didn't always get it right in the beginning. I started out with 2 people, and now, I have roughly 10 people that are working with me at both locations. But it was really very humbling to be working and putting in those hours, and my employees would leave at 5 o'clock. And then, of course, when it was time to pay them, whether I had made any money or not, I'd have to pay them, and that was really, really something to process, that here I would be on my end, not bringing home a check to my family, but making sure that my employees did. And I always, said as an entrepreneur, I would never play games with my employees because they are W-2 employees. They don't have the dream, they don't have the vision. They need to get their check on the 1st and the 15th, period. But what it also did on the other side, me making that sacrifice very early, sometimes foregoing my own compensation, was if they are not aligning with the vision, if they are not giving back to the organization, if they are not on the journey to being cost neutral and an asset to the business, I have no qualms parting ways at all. That's something that I learned really early on, not to keep someone on longer than they should be on. If they are not doing the things that they need to be doing, it's not a guilt thing for me. It's a business decision because my family is my why.
Thank you so much for tuning into the first half of my interview with Deidre Bembry, founder and CEO of Deidre Bembry Insurance Agency. I think Deidre covered some very valuable lessons as a new business owner all the way to where she is today. Going after your dreams, being conservative when it comes to your money. After all, cash is king, and living small. People often warn us to live below our means, but sometimes that can be a difficult thing to do. As an entrepreneur, though, living below your means and being conservative with your finances will ultimately get you ahead of the game. There is so much more to Deidre's story. Please join me next week where you can hear more about the start of she and her husband's nonprofit and her newest venture to help us all live a better life. Thank you so much for listening today. I truly appreciate you. If you have not already, please subscribe to the podcast and invite a friend along to do the same. If you know someone that has that entrepreneurial spirit, maybe they haven't even seen it yet, but you can see it in them, please share this podcast with them. Also, again, please follow me on Instagram at Stitched for Success for your daily dose of inspiration or tips. And if you have any questions or thoughts, please direct message me via Instagram or leave me a voicemail message by visiting stitchedforsuccess.com on your mobile phone. Always a pleasure to have you listen in. Have a great one.